Nadya, please start.
Hello, everybody. We welcome you at our Startup Leaders Club online panel discussion by inspirational leaders of innovation and drivers of change. And our today's topic is Crisis 2020, Fast Track to the New Reality. And we'll be having this brainstorming session to find new ways out of the current situation with our today's co-moderators and panelists. So my name is Nadya Nesterova. I am an independent director of the board of the National Alternative Investment Management Association. And my co-moderator today is Gianpaolo Parigi, venture capitalist and chairman of the Single Family Office. And today our speakers include Jill Stelfox, chairman and CEO of Penzura, Kurt Collins, founding builder of VII, Cheryl Conti, CEO of Do Big Things, and Lillian Wills, managing partner at Pop Agency, Dan Nadev, a CEO of Enviro Power, and James Haft, founder of PERE Capital, Justin Hughes, co-founder and CEO of JoyHub, and Greg Kidd, co-founder and CEO of Global ID. So we'll start with a brief introduction of everybody on our today's panel, just to get to know each other better, because we're connecting from different parts of the world, different backgrounds and industries here in place. And Dan, would you please start with a brief intro on yourself?
Yeah, Nadia, thank you so much. So my name is Dan. I'm the CEO of Enviro Power. We are a young company in the energy space, basically an energy startup, backed up by two large entities. One is the major VC here in Connecticut Innovations, and also Burnham Holdings, which is a large US-based boiler manufacturer. What we bring to the market belongs very much to the trends that we're already discussing the pre-party, a few minutes ago, which is the drive for independency. In our case, energy independency. We bring to the market basically a heating system that generates electricity at near zero cost and provide backup power to small businesses and homes.
Thank you. And James, would you also join us?
Hi, I'm James Haft. I'm the founder and CEO of PERE Capital. We're a boutique investment bank, merchant bank that was formed in 1996 to focus on businesses that were going to benefit and change from the digitization of information. Over the last 5 years, we've been focused exclusively on distributed ledger technologies, which is the underpinnings to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because we think that the peer-to-peer trustless form of communication represents an answer for what humanity is looking for as we try and figure out how to avoid the problems of centralization and prejudice in the economy and in society. So we have a fund which will be public as of next month, where you can invest in the leading opportunities in distributed ledger, which will allow people to speak freely globally and to do business with people as they see fit, without the current centralized filters that form many of the problems in today's society and economy.
Thank you so much, James. And Cheryl?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Conti. I'm the CEO of Do Big Things. Do Big Things is a digital agency that specializes in helping the world's leading causes and campaigns to provide the new narrative and new tech for the new era in which we all sense that we're living. I'm also the co-founder of Attentively. Attentively is a social marketing automation tool that is the first tech startup with a Black female founder on board to be acquired by a NASDAQ company, Blackbaud.
Thank you, Cheryl. And Kurt? Kurt, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. My name is Kurt Collins. I'm the founding builder, which is essentially the head techie at a company called Shebang. We work with nonprofits and international NGOs, helping them figure out different ways to manage and track their impact. I work a lot with underrepresented minorities and startup companies to help them achieve their goals.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Justin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin Hughes, CEO and co-founder of JoyHub. JoyHub's a technology company focused on providing solutions to rental housing operators. We enable data-driven decision-making and a better user experience for both tenants and operators with our integration and engagement platform.
Thank you, Justin. And Lin.
Hello, I'm Lin Wills. Happy to be here. I am the managing partner of the POP agency, which is a brand marketing agency. We advise startups on brand setting and managing the interplay of storytelling and story making to grow business and lend funding. I also am advisor for Loyal.vc.
Thank you, Lin. And Jill?
Hi, I'm Jill Stelfox. I'm the CEO and chairman of Panzura. We provide collaborative software that works across hybrid clouds and allows employees to share files and applications in real time. So obviously during COVID, we've had tremendous growth. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much, Jill. And Greg?
Hi, I'm Greg Kidd. I'm the CEO of Global ID. We let people have a self-sovereign identity, meaning they can take their identity credentials plus their messaging capabilities, their wallet, their files to any participating app in the world so that your identity is controlled by you rather than a corporation or a government.
Thank you very much, Greg. And Gianpaolo?
Hello, everyone. Gianpaolo Parigi, venture capitalist, chairman of the Single Family Office. Welcome, everyone, again. Nadya, back to you.
Thank you. So we see lots of things going on right now, and we see ourselves as representatives of many industries around the world, and we're all located in different parts. So I would like you all to share what is going on with your current businesses. Do you see any challenges or opportunities going on right this week? Because currently we have a number of our recurrent speakers today. Maybe you observe some of the changes. Now, most of geographies, they lift COVID-19 regimes, so we have more flexibility, but still lots of protests in some of them. So, Cheryl, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks, Nadya. Well, here in the US and even in Silicon Valley, where I live, there are a bunch of different cultural forces that are also putting pressure on businesses. Certainly even our business, I mean, we work with, some of the organizations that are organizing protests. The NAACP has been a client, Color of Change, the Movement for Black Lives is a current client right now. And so, even we have had to do quite a lot of internal dialogue with our team and external value statements. And that's something that we're seeing in general, at least across American society. Almost every corporation has provided some sort of value statement and has pledged to do something differently, either in their organization or make a donation. So that's adding certainly, complexity to the environment that was already, somewhat under pressure because of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And James, would you like to add some points and add your own story? James, you're muted.
Thank you. I think that, from my own story, I've kind of been waiting for this period that's happening now, where there's really an acceleration of the realization that the system is broken. And that while there's definitely some good things that are happening in capitalism and in the United States and in business development and in society, that there's a lot of assumptions that we've been making that maybe are not rock solid and maybe needed to be questioned earlier and will be questioned now. And so I think that this, what I've seen in my business is breaking of some shackles and the opportunity for new ways of thought to come in. I mean, the idea of decentralization of communication, the idea of self-autonomy of people to do their job as they're distributed into homes. These all go together with the idea of decentralized communication and and giving people more trust as individuals and getting away from the corporate military structures, which have become the efficiency maximizers. And I think we've gotten to the end of that efficiency cycle, and we're starting to see that something new could happen now. I also think that so that's it. Thank you.
No, just at a point.
Yeah. So the other thing I think is that we're starting to value things other than maximalization. We're starting to value, that Cisco is allowing their customers to have a few months free. That, Bank of America called me up and said, here's some forgiveness. Chase called up with the opposite result. Guess which bank I'm going to use in the future. And when I wanted to deal with the government, Chase totally forgot about me. And the local bank, Berkshire Bank, called me up and came through and was able to deal with me as an individual and serve my needs. So I just think that again, it's more fractals of how we're starting to reevaluate around us, who works with us and who we want to be with in the future.
Thank you, James. And Kurt, what's going on in your sector?
So kind of like what Cheryl alluded to or spoke to as well, my sector is actually pretty busy at the moment. The interesting thing about what's going on, especially in the nonprofit sector, but even with some of the other organizations that I consult with and work with, is that there's a lot of work to be done, but there's not as much money flowing through the industry in order to get that work done. I see a lot of organizations providing support in kind, but a lot of the nonprofits that I'm working with right now are struggling in some ways. They know that right now is a time to truly have impact, but at the same time, their funds have started to dry up. So this is a bit of a tough time for nonprofits that aren't necessarily on the front line of this specific struggle in the U.S. But with that said, it's also a good time. It's a time of validation, and I think at the end of this period, we will see some interesting outcomes in terms of who is having true impact in the space.
Thank you, Kurt. Do you find any new alternative ways to track this fundraising, or maybe new formats of working with your audiences to attract this community power, which could support?
Yeah. One of the organizations I worked with did manage to pull together a significant amount of funds for their user base, basically pulling on individuals of high net worth and really asking them to step up at this point in time. The problem is that's not an endless funnel of revenue. That is more than likely a 1 or 2 time thing, and once a high net worth individual gives a certain amount of money to a specific cause of some sort, it seems to be less likely that they're going to give to other causes, right? So you really need to get to those people first, and that makes it tough for the industry overall. So I think it's just tricky at this point to be in the right place at the right time and take advantage of the business opportunities that are out there in the nonprofit space. But again, I have hope.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. The nonprofit sector in the U.S. consumes about $800 billion worth of goods and services every year. So it's actually a significant driver of the economy. And, we've certainly seen a lot of pressure on philanthropy, and philanthropy stepping up, certainly. But at the same time, where, you have this, social innovation drive just in general, across society, what we've found in our studies of, the response to the current evolution of the crisis is, it's not enough to make a statement of values. That's important. It's important. But, what we see is, when a corporation just says, hey, we stand with Black Lives Matter, or we stand in solidarity, the comments, and the retweets are, well, what are you doing, right? Like what's changing? And I think that's an interesting new development where, businesses are really having to respond to their customers and their vendors and suppliers and say, okay, well, are we changing our hiring practices? Are we making investments in places that we haven't made investments before? Are we making donations that we haven't? How are we supporting our employees, who may, be Black or brown? And, so that's an interesting new development that, again, I think is putting more pressure on businesses at a time when they're already strapped.
Thank you, Cheryl and Jill. So you managed to make an acquisition during this pandemic period. Would you also share some of your observations and how do you cope with the current situation, or maybe your clients and peers?
Yep. So we put in a letter of intent to purchase a customer or to purchase a company 2 days before COVID shut down California, and ultimately decided to close on the transaction about 30 days later. So right in the middle. So the opportunity to meet face-to-face with employees in an extremely stressful time it was very difficult, and obviously meet with customers and partners. So it's a lot of Zoom time and a lot of getting to know people. But this goes back to so much, I think, of what Cheryl and Kurt were talking about in terms of what more can we do as CEOs of companies to take care of our employees and to stand behind what has to change. And I think COVID gave us the opportunity to really look at what our value systems are and how we can support those that agree with it and stop doing business with those that don't. And so that's been kind of a wonderful house cleaning across the board, and an opportunity to really step up and do more, hire better people of color, really change the game. And so we are doing everything we can to do that. People are so stressed, and I think you have to meet them at the core human levels now.
I think it's a great comment, Jill. And Greg, I would like to hear your opinion about that, because philanthropy is good under any circumstance. It's very noble, and in certain moments like now, it definitely helps on the very short term. But to me, echoing what Jill just said, it's a little bit like handing over the fish when in fact we should be capable of giving a fishing rod and better instruments to certain people that need to be empowered and or assisted or facilitated or encouraged. Well, what do you think companies could do in this regard?
Well, I think one of the things COVID showed that is if you're don't have a way of having a seat at the table electronically with like a mobile phone and access to bandwidth in COVID, it was very, very isolating. For our particular company, I'm based in Silicon Valley, but my teams are based in New Zealand and in Ljubljana, Slovenia, Braga, Portugal, Barcelona, Spain. We all became much closer together as a company. It's been a bonding experience for us. And what it's made us aware of is how can we take the tools that work for us and make those baseline tools so that every single person in the world has a right and a responsibility to have not just an identity, but the permissions that go with it, the ability to get access to this Zoomy world that we're in, like the yoga instructor who could give a Zoom class and also have integrated payments happen right for them, so that it doesn't become a two-class system of haves and have-nots in this post-COVID world, even more so than it was before. And so we're committed to taking the tools that worked for us internally within our team and making them a baseline team that any individual or group could participate. So it's been exciting for us. We're doubling down. COVID just brought the future forward for us and made it a sense of urgency and focus for everybody in our ecosystem.
I think one of the things I learned in my business for the VC side is that almost never is the business that gets pitched to me by the entrepreneur the business that ends up being the success. And I have two I have two unicorns in my portfolio. I look at it as much luck as anything else, really picking good teams. But when you think about it, both of those companies did exactly what most companies did that are successful in my portfolio, which is that they had passion and they had a problem that they wanted to solve and a community they wanted to serve. And they tried to do it and found that in the root of trying to create the solution that they thought was the answer, they hit roadblocks and they solved those roadblocks. And in solving one of those roadblocks, they figure out that that's actually the problem that other people are having, and that becomes the business that they become successful with. You know, it's a clunky way of getting to the product market fit that everybody always talks about. And so a lot of times you'll find that the best businesses and the most interesting businesses in tech have been founded in downturns when people hit roadblocks and problems and had to overcome them. And then in that solution found an answer that had a voice and created community.
So definitely the best poetry is created in moments of sorrow, not in moments of joy. Justin, what do you think you can add in terms of what companies can contribute beside and beyond the obvious philanthropy and say short-term help?
Sure. Yeah, I think that we are at a critical moment where in the past there may have been a comfort in or an aversion to being fully present in the conversation, but you can't stand on the sidelines. I don't think personally, I don't think professionally, I don't think companies or people have that luxury, and I think there's a duty to speak up and use your voice in whatever capacity it is to fight the good fight and move the ball forward. I think it's very interesting. James, I think, or I forget which who mentioned that COVID-19 seems to have ushered the future along from a technology perspective. I think that a lot of what we're seeing on the social justice side of things are moving us faster forward into the future. It may be uncomfortable, but these are great times to take advantage of this momentum and make the world a better place. So that's just kind of more of a holistic general sense. As far as kind of the topic of what my vertical, my industry, I'm in real estate and technology. Real estate has definitely been fraught with its own issues in the past. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the affordable housing space. I think being able to better serve the people that our product ultimately, our product of housing and how that serves people really needs to be addressed. And I think that there's a lot of limitations at the regulatory level that create a burden that gets passed on down to people, and limits our ability to address the limitations that exist. But outside of my vertical, I see a lot of challenges and opportunities in education technology, healthcare. I love hearing these stories about support technologies around remote work, because I think that these are all things that are feeding into each other. The more we see people working from home, the more we see people less utilizing office space, we may see opportunities where we see reutilization in that office space and converting office to housing, and maybe killing two birds with one stone, empowering a better work-life balance, people working from home, creating more housing. And these are all things that may have sounded very strange, but now that what we're seeing happening with the pandemic and everything else, I see that as a great opportunity that I'd like to see unfold.
Very nice, very nice. So basically reconnecting to the core values of the human beings and addressing the issues that needs to be addressed. Very good comments. Lillian, what's your contribution to this very positive line of thoughts that we are hearing today?
Right, yeah. So I see in our business so like a shape shift with culture. So we kind of shifting all the time, and regardless pandemic. But pandemic to us, it seems like a equalizer for in two layers. One is like in the advertising, branding arena, that where I think the traditional like Hollywood blockbuster advertiser, they're not able to do it. So bring up scrappy brands, they're giving a chance for the eyeballs. That's great opportunity for the small startups. And for the startup arena, like lots of startups looking for funding, and it's a new equalizer where you can just send an email pitch. The traditional like connections, people are able to get FaceTime, all these privilege seems more remote, and so everyone international pitch can happen, and people are cutting deal over Zooms, Skypes. So on another sense, just pure advertising arena branding is that my industry has experiencing lots of commodification for the past. Before the pandemic, it's like we were seeing mostly as just a service provider. You know, you get to spend money on a channel, what to say. But with the pandemic, it's a focus more on what to say versus then how you saying it. So how you saying it is spending money on the channels, advertising, but what to say was more important. So we've been like being challenges like epic challenge on creativity and more strategic value, and be thoughtful and connect with the culture. And these are a great opportunity, also an epic challenge for industry.
Thank you, Lillian. Dan, you're an expert on energy. What do you think, where you think is the new frontier in the energy industry?
Yes, thanks for the question, a good one, and I do want to relate it to the current discussion. So I think that the energy sector, both here in North America as well as in Europe, maybe even globally, Australia definitely is part of that, is going through a tectonic shift for over a decade. And this tectonic shift seems to be always pushed forward, accelerating from one crisis to another. It could be a social crisis or a social change with millennials coming on board with their different way to do things or different approach to ours as old schools, as someone mentioned. It's as a crisis, could be an economic crisis or social crisis like we are experiencing today with the COVID-19 impacting that. It could be a natural disaster like Sandy that pushed the industry forward in this tectonic shift. So what is that tectonic shift? I think it's very relevant to the discussion that we are talking here. I think that both James and Justin, also you, Gianpaolo, mentioned that it's basically all about being more independent individually as a home, as a family, and so forth. It's about basically being living in an autonomous home that is not at the mercy of a utility, whether they fix your wires or not, or whether they decided together with the government to increase your rate of electricity year by 10, 15, 20%, just to justify sometimes inexpensive and unnecessary projects. It's about basically being independent energy-wise. And what propelled that is this shift with the crisis that push it forward, but also technology in many ways. Today, with the combination of new technology in the energy world, a home can be almost as sophisticated as a power utility. And so the same way the power utility decides whether the energy that flows into your home would come from a nuclear coal plant or a gas-fired power plant, your home, if it's equipped with the right equipment, with the right and generation, could be a combination of a solar and battery, solar and micro-combined and power and battery. With this new technology, can make this type of decision to fully and completely optimize your home, regardless of what flows to the grid, almost to the point that your home does not need the grid, which means that you are an independent, energy independent unit. And that, I think, that comes a lot with the discussion about where we are heading as a society. Are we heading more towards embracing government regulation and interference in our life? Or, at least from my point of view, from the energy sector, being completely independent and can make our own decision what energy we want to consume, when and where.
Thank
things
you,
is
Dan. Yeah,
one of the
James.
things is, as I always talk about when I do the keynotes, I talk about how everything is fractals. It's all really the same thing. And the amazing thing is I'm sitting here smiling as everybody speaks about their different perspective. It's really all pieces of the same puzzle, right? And so to me, that's one of the things that is heartening, is because you kind of know it's that although it feels like chaos and it feels like everything's ripping apart, maybe things are just realigning so that we can put it together in a smarter way. You know, anyway, it's just a little thought there.
I think it's a great contribution, James, and everybody here on this panel today is reflecting what you just said, which is good. I hope this propagates across the nation and in the world, because, you know, now this is happening in the US, but whatever happens in the US, we have seen in recent history tends to, again, reverberate across the pond and pretty soon around the world, you know, very quickly. So I think it regards all of us. And very, very good point.
Can I just say, yeah, just one quick thing. One thing that in general does concern me about the move towards automation, and trust me, I am a pro automation kind of guy. My entire home right now is a smart home. I've outfitted my mother's place with the exact same thing. Solar. She is mostly off the grid at this point in time. So I am on board this train to the future. But I'd like to point out that one of the things that COVID-19 has exposed is this extreme digital divide within our society, whether within the United States, but this also exists in Europe and other places throughout the world, where if you look at the unemployment numbers that just came out in the United States today, as we were mentioning earlier on the call, while unemployment in general has gone down for the white population in the U.S., it has increased for the Black population and Latino population, for the Black and Brown population in the U.S. And part of that has its roots in the digital divide, because we have those companies that are white collar, considered white collar organizations, they can have their employees work from home. I have schools that I've worked with, that I currently work with, whose students haven't been able to actually participate in the lessons because they don't have internet connections at home. So one of the major concerns that I have as we move forward towards a more home-focused work environment is that it's going to leave behind a certain segment of the population, regardless of if that segment of the population is in the US or the EU or even Asia. It's going to leave behind a certain segment of the population unless we figure out a way to make sure that it doesn't.
You know, Kurt, you brought a very good idea. And I think that we should all recognize that I guess all of us here on this call are very, very blessed, to the degree that, you know, technology helped us to cross this crisis almost without a scratch. We just work from home instead of going to the office. Some of us, we prefer that. Some with the more dynamic kids maybe wish they would be in the office from time to time. But really escape that from without a scratch. I actually remember saying this to my brother, who is also a techie in Silicon Valley, that if you compare this to another pandemic, or if this happened like 30 years ago, I think that all of us regarding blue collar, white collar will be in a very, very different situation. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that the division is actually, the line of the division is marked by technology. And I'm not sure how you solve this today, because we still need bus driver and people to serve us at restaurant and so forth. But I just wonder if this will be another kick forward to the world of robotics. So basically there will be less and less, you know, what we call blue collar workers, and our responsibility as a society is really to shift everyone to the other side, to the better side of technology, with education obviously as the front line of that dimension.
This goes back, I think, a lot to like, what more can we do as CEOs to help our people? And this really, it's surprising how many people, I'm also in Silicon Valley, schools and school children that do not have tools to succeed right now. Yet, as a company, we have old laptops, we have old servers, we have all kinds of things, right? Like, get on it and get donating. And like, you've got to make changes, and you have to do it now. And I just think this is such a great time because our employees are motivated to help. You know, as soon as we say, let's adopt a school, they're in. Like, let's do it. We'll drive the laptops to kids. We'll do it. So like, we've got to do our individual little parts person by person and not wait for some government or something to change.
I think if we can adopt a highway, we can adopt a school. And the problem exists, like Kurt said, also in pockets of Europe. For sure, it exists even more in Asia and Africa. But it should be addressed. And funny it is how the school topics always got neglected for decades on end, but they always, get back through the window when they left the door. And we find that, to reconstruct, like James said, I'd say more virtuous society, we gotta go back to the pillars of society, school being one.
Well, and what I would say is, what drove economic prosperity, in the modern era is the growth of the middle class. And right now, the middle class around the world, is really under pressure because of poor leadership and policies that have not kept in step with the needs of populations. And so if we expect and desire greater prosperity going forward, it means we need to rethink how our economy works and how our policies serve and uplift people from all parts of society, because that's where genius comes from. If we imagine that genius only comes from a small group of people, it means that we're going to miss out on, creating that larger base of consumers.
That's interesting. Sorry, Kurt, you go ahead, please.
No, I was sorry about that. I was just going to say it's fascinating that you bring that up, because one of the things I think that needs to happen in the technology industry as a whole is we need to listen more. We have done a terrible job of listening to non-standard communities, let's just call it. We have left a lot of money on the table as a consequence of that. And as a capitalist, that offends me. But as a Black man, it also offends me too, because there are a number of communities out there that are that have amazing business needs that can be addressed, that aren't necessarily targeted towards what funders in general understand. And so I hope that one of the things that comes out of this specific time period is actually finding that genius that you're talking about, Cheryl, in non-traditional communities, because that only leads to, in my opinion, only leads to greater prosperity for everybody involved.
I also thought what you said was about, searching for the next Einstein, essentially, and how you, by limiting the audience to white Christian males, how we might not be doing ourselves a favor. I completely agree with that. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we need to be diverse, and that we need to make opportunities, available in terms of education and access to communication, because we're in a race now, against time, and we need to be as inclusive as possible, get the best answers possible, and have the biggest community possible to action it. So I totally applaud what you said. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that we have a social economic experiment going on right now, where we now know that if we identify something as a problem and say it's urgent, that we can throw an amazing amount of resources at it really quickly and change it, so that it's not a U shape or a this shape or that shape. It's a V shape that goes like a rocket upward, whatever we have to listen to on TV, right? But the answer is, if we really thought that the education of minorities, and women in the United States was important, we could take $1 trillion and throw it at it. Because you know what? Nobody knows how many dollars there are in the United States, and apparently nobody cares. So So I think that where we are right now is, throw the playbook out the window. We have this fiat play money anyway. Why not take it and marshal resources towards things that can really make a change? And when I meet with people up here who are more conservative, they talk about how we have to fix the economy, and once that's in, then we have the ability to be stable and all the rest of this crap. And what my response is, the problem with what's happening in the United States and in the larger, around the world, is not money. It's that we don't like each other, and that we're not listening to each other, and that we're not caring about each other. And until we take care of those base emotions, this stuff isn't going to change. And so I hope that this readjustment of our how we relate to each other can help us start to have different and more open conversations and start to understand the base things that we need to change.
Question for all the panelists. You see this is an election year. You see this as an advantage or a disadvantage? Who wants to start? I see, one at a time.
Sorry, go ahead.
I see it as an advantage. I mean, having so many things occur at once, really pressure testing every system of accountability that we have, calling into question long-held assumptions, utilizing that energy, heading into a period of time where we as citizens have the opportunity to influence the course of the future. I think it's great. It would be a terrible disservice to humanity to have the season of change occur without an influx of energy to see it actually make meaningful long-term change.
I would like to add another angle. I even change your question a little bit, Gianpaolo. I think that it's not election year. It's election period. I don't think that the election haven't stopped on November of 2016. I think that we are in an election for 4 years. I think that we see that. And that's by itself, it's not a bad thing. As Justin said, it brings up topics up front. It sharpens things that we need to be aware of. But it actually does something that we should be aware of, or maybe even concerned. I think that it politicizes everything. Politicize healthcare, politicize any topic in society. Politicize also something that, even if we agree that is part of society, should have some taste of professionalism. Basically, not on everything needs to be tied to a politic agenda, left or right, or somewhere in the center. And I think that what we see, at least in the energy industry, and I think that it's applicable to pretty much any major topic here, even if it should be at least in some degree apolitical, that we see everything being flavored or colored by politics. And in some ways maybe it's good because it takes the agenda and lift it, but in other ways, think about it, really we take this division deep into areas that should be actually governed by sometimes even pure professionalism, and now it's becoming very political.
Oh, it should not be maybe non-political. What I think it should be non-partisan, that for sure, because society is affected.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, well.
As someone who works on these issues, we work with nonprofits, we work with corporations like Google, Etsy, NBC, Universal, but we also work on candidate campaigns. In fact, one of our clients is Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, who is going up against very successfully Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. And what we're experiencing is almost a permanent election cycle. Even though 2020 is a huge year, extremely important, the work for 2022, the pressure around the House and the Senate here will begin almost immediately. So, I think that that's something that is a little new in the 21st century, at least in the United States, and that then also, as the other panelists have mentioned, is putting cultural pressure and therefore, pressure on businesses, indirectly, who are impacted by the policies and the tension around policies, the whipsaw of policies that are happening.
Yeah, I would like to weigh in on that. I've seen that all the policy are, like either too extreme, both party, and I'm dreaming up a movement called Third Way, that where it really, so all these like either Democrat, Republican, they just standing on, they lack creativity. They couldn't see the middle ground, and all the policy they are making just being oppositional to each other. And so it kind of leave the country become the collateral damage of these fights. But there's so much creativity can be created in the third way. That's kind of my dream. Just
James,
bubble up.
thank you, Lillian. James, if you had to pass a message to the outside world that is watching us, and of course now all of the panelists are in the US or related to the US very strongly, what would be the message?
I think well, if I could tie this into your previous question, I think that humans tend to get the causal arrow backwards. So, it's like, oh my God, we get to see the stress testing of Trump because all these things have happened at once. But all these things didn't have to happen at once. They happened at once because we had Trump, right? And so, when I look at the world, I think that what my message is to everybody is that history is going to measure us, right? And they're going to look back at what we did. What did you do? This reminds me of when I was a kid. I'm going to date myself here. It's going to be embarrassing. But my parents took me to the protests against the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C. when I was a kid. I was 8, 9 years old. And the most interesting thing to me about it was that women were running around topless. But I was in front of the Capitol building, and we're there protesting, and then the police came in battle gear and started throwing tear gas at us. And I remember my parents covering my face with a wet rag and trying to breathe and running away, from the military. As far as I could tell, I didn't know the difference between police and the army and anything else. And I was terrified running down. I still remember as an 8-year-old running down the Capitol, in front of the Capitol, down the mall, while being chased by the police with people screaming and smoke bombs going off, and that generation did something, and I was involved in as a child. And now I'm looking at this as another opportunity. Things are changing now. If we just go back to normal in a month or two, then we've really missed a huge opportunity. And so I think that now is the time to get to a new normal, and to find ways to break the shackles of the way we've been, sorry to use that word, but to the way we've been constrained in our minds and in our abilities to what we think is real and what's capable, and change it and challenge the norms, and reach out to people that you want to get together with, to have the same mind, and to make a change in the world together.
Thank you very much. Kurt, I see you pondering. Penny for your thought. Penny for your thought.
Yeah, I have, I'm going to date myself as well here, but probably not all the way back to the Vietnam War. Sorry about that. But I remember back in 1985 when I, as a teenager, went to the Million Man March on Washington. And that was a seminal moment for me as well. Not because there wasn't any violence or anything like that going on there. There was just a feeling of togetherness. And more so than what's going on socially and politically in the United States at this moment. I found it heartening to see how a majority of the country came together to truly fight COVID-19. That to me shows the spirit, not just of the United States, but actually of the entire world. It's one of the first times, the first time in my lifetime anyways, that I have experienced a global coming together. I think more than anything else, as we've said on this call already, this is a time period for change. And from a business perspective, I think this is much like in the crash in 2009, or in the global recession rather, 2009. I think we will see a lot coming out of this. From a business perspective, more companies like Uber and Lyft and some others that came around that time. I think what we need to, I think our sure that the organizations that spring out of this aren't just the ones that we are used to, right? I think that we need to listen as a community, as a technology community. We need to listen to all the problems of the world and truly try to find unique problems to solve, because it's out of those, to me, that will spring a platform for change that can last generations.
Thank you, Kurt. And think about this, we're all in technology. Actually, technology is giving us enormous advantages, and it's easing up our lives. But I think more importantly, technology allows to call a spade and avoid that the powers that be push under the rug, under the carpet, the dust. And information is readily available, and it just goes around the world very quickly today. So I think, coherent, proactive movements can be energized and move to action much quicker than ever before, and with much more clarity of vision and intent than ever before. So I think that's a beautiful thing that technology is allowing us to have as a benefit. And I think this is the greatest single asset that I see in technology nowadays for what we're living through. Nadya, you want to add something?
Yes, sure. So most of you highlighted that the source of community, as well as the anti-fragility and decentralizations, are important now. So we have a final round of input from all of you just before we close the session. So maybe some of your key recommendations for the serial entrepreneurs and our VC investors before we go. So Cheryl, would you like to add something as a summary of our today's brainstorming session and discussion?
This has been a really great talk, and I'm grateful to everyone, all these smart people here on the panel. If you're a leader, if you're a venture capitalist, or you're a CEO or an executive, your employees are looking to you now and your customers for leadership. And therefore that means, you are responsible for educating yourself on anti-racism. Lafayette Square, which Trump famously cleared recently, was a slave market. The Capitol building was built by slave labor. There is a fundamental, broken piece, in the middle of our country that then has rippled out across the rest of the world. So I highly recommend, there's a great book called White Fragility that you can pick up on Amazon, or The New Jim Crow by my friend, Dr. Michelle Alexander, to educate yourself. If you don't have time for that, there's a lot of great movies. Any streaming service you look at here in the United States is compiling great movies by diverse producers and filmmakers. There's lots of ways to educate yourself, so that you personally, if you're a CEO, your strengths and your weaknesses tend to be replicated throughout the system. And that's true of the startups in which you're investing too. And so the more you can do something to educate and refine yourself and see things from a different light, the more that's going to create a stronger society that has more prosperity and fewer protests.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And Kurt?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Cheryl just said. And I also think that, let's not forget right now that in times of turmoil, like we're experiencing currently, there are people that are going to be left behind, and it's incumbent upon us as leaders in all of our respective spaces to truly find pathways for success for those who are going to be left behind. We are responsible for the generation that comes after us, and we are in the place right now to actually make real change. That's why I'm busier than ever and making less money than ever at the moment. But it is just one of those times when it's an inflection point for us to truly affect change.
Thank you so much. And Justin, would you like to share with our audiences some key messages of yours of today's conversation?
Sure, yeah, and I'll keep it short and sweet to the point. Just my own personal things that I've tasked myself with growing better at. It's listening first and listening more and listening often. Listen, listen, listen. If I could just have it be one word, it's listen. And then the second thing I'm challenging myself to do more of is just get uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable, because the pathway to what's right and the pathway to what's better is an uncomfortable pathway sometimes. And you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. And then finally, it's just holding ourselves and each other to a better standard with our platforms that we have, our voice that we have, utilizing it for good, and striving to come from a place of love, empathy, and justice. And I feel like, you know, even if I maybe say the wrong thing or I do the wrong thing, as long as I'm coming from the right place and I'm trying to strive for the right thing for everybody, I can at least fall back on that and know that you know, I'm trying my best. So that's just from my perspective what I'm trying to do for myself and for those around me, and hopefully we can all join together and do the same.
Thank you so much, Justin. And James? James, you're muted.
Sorry, computer problems. First of all, fantastic panel, and thank you so much. I really learned so much, and I hope to get to know everyone on the panel better in the future, see how we can collaborate. The first thing is, to go back to what was just said, is I always say that you're only learning when you're listening. You don't learn anything when you're talking or when you're distracted. So I think that, listen. And the thought that comes to mind, and for my closing thought, is that the Chinese have the same symbol for change, danger, and opportunity. And that's really my philosophy here, is that we have that situation right now. Change, danger, opportunity. And that if you're an individual, if I was talking to mentoring entrepreneurs right now, I would say, look around you. There's business opportunities popping up that are available where you're starting with blue ocean and with competitors that don't really have advantage over you. And look at people who have been delivering masks, or people who've been delivering food, or people who've been finding, or Zoom, who came out of the blue, right, to become a unicorn or whatever they did. So I think that look around you, see what's happening, and treat every change as an opportunity to be part of what comes next.
I think also,
yeah, Gianpaolo?
No, just in terms of the ability to listen, I think it's where males should make themselves a little bit redundant and leave more space to women, because, I think there would be a great deal of advantage for everyone in doing so.
My partner always says, if you look at the countries that are doing well right now and COVID and everything else, they're all led by women.
Thank you. Lillian?
Thank you. I get inspiration from this great panel and diversity. I think it resonates with my own observation for startup, is that inclusion and diversity that really is kind of triangulate your company, that make you see the forest, not just seeing the trees. So that's my message.
Thank you. And Jill?
Yeah, I think this is an exciting time for entrepreneurs. Having been a female entrepreneur for years, it's one of those times where I think if you are brave and you listen, you can take a lot of advantage as to what is going on and find your way. So I would encourage people not to wait to start a business or to continue their business, to just lean in and work even harder. And to the VC community that has always, frankly, given me hell, I think they need to do more. You know, to a woman that was told 15 years ago, I could never raise money and has now returned over $1 billion to investors, I think you should look again at minorities of all kinds and think about funding people other than white Midwest males. Yeah.
Thank you. And Dan?
So thanks so much. It was a really inspiring panel. Obviously, as CEOs, we are committed to our companies and to our shareholders, but I think that we should never forget that our company should be committed to society if we want to succeed long term. And we should always take the vision, the storyline, and ask ourselves how our vision is meshed with what's going on in society long term, how we are integrated and provide benefits to society. Otherwise, why to have a business from the get-go? And I would like to take this sentence, to use that sentence that usually is being used more tactically into the strategic level, which is lemon to lemonade. I think that if you take the long vision of where society goes and you're a CEO of a startup, you should ask yourself strategically, I have lemons, how I make the vision lemonade.
Thank you very much to all. So we welcome you to join our different formats of interaction, and please advise the different types of panels you can join: keynotes, masterclasses, roadshows, and Startup Leaders Club panel discussions. And see you all soon, and welcome to all of our events, and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.